It was just after midnight. Inside a modest temple in Kyoto, the most powerful man in Japan was asleep, with fewer than 30 attendants. Outside, 13,000 soldiers had quietly surrounded every gate. They wore the crest of a trusted general, a man who had served faithfully for 20 years. By the time the sound of marching feet broke the night air, there was no escape. The man who had crushed armies, burned monasteries, and bent a nation to his will would be dead before morning. This is the story of the Honnoji incident, the greatest betrayal in samurai history.
To understand why this night mattered, we must understand the world Oda Nobunaga had built. Japan in 1582 had endured over a century of civil war, the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. Dozens of warlords had fought ceaselessly for dominance, burning cities, slaughtering peasants, and tearing apart the old order. The emperor sat in Kyoto, powerless and half-forgotten. The shogunate had collapsed. Into this chaos, one man had risen with terrifying speed, not through patience or negotiation, but through an entirely new kind of ruthlessness. Oda Nobunaga was born in 1534, the son of a minor lord in Owari province. As a young man, he earned the nickname Owari no Outsuke, the Fool of Owari, for his eccentric behavior, wearing short sleeves, eating while walking, treating peasants as equals, challenging every tradition of samurai decorum. His own father died without naming him heir. Retainers mocked him. But when a rival clan marched 25,000 troops toward his castle in 1560, Nobunaga did not retreat. With fewer than 3,000 men, in the middle of a thunderstorm, he attacked. And he won. Japan had never seen anything like him. Over the next 2 decades, Nobunaga rewrote the rules of warfare. He was the first Japanese commander to deploy firearms on a mass scale. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, his organized volley fire shattered the legendary Takeda cavalry in minutes. He dismantled Buddhist monasteries that had become military powers, burning the mountain fortress of Enryakuji to the ground with everyone inside. He abolished the guild monopolies that choked commerce. He welcomed Jesuit missionaries and European technology. He built roads, conducted land surveys, and began standardizing weights and measures. He was simultaneously medieval warlord and proto-modernizer, and he terrified everyone around him. By 1582, Nobunaga controlled roughly a third of Japan, the heartland, including Kyoto, the ancient capital. He had already destroyed his 2 greatest rivals, the Takeda and the Ikko-Ikki Buddhist leagues. The Mori clan to the west is under siege. The remaining warlords in the north and east were outmatched or subdued. Historians estimate he was 2 to 3 years from total unification of Japan. He had even begun hinting at a new political title, something beyond shogun, something no Japanese ruler had ever held. The man who called himself the enemy of Buddha was about to become the master of heaven. Among his most trusted generals was Akechi Mitsuhide. Where Nobunaga was impulsive and confrontational, Mitsuhide was cultivated and precise. He was unusually well-educated, a poet, a student of Confucian classics, a master of the tea ceremony. He served as Nobunaga's liaison to the imperial court and to the aristocracy, performing the delicate diplomatic work that Nobunaga himself had no patience for. He was also a formidable battlefield commander who had pacified the Tamba region through a combination of military skill and careful politics. In Nobunaga's hierarchy, he ranked among the inner circle. He had no obvious reason to rebel. Yet something had been building in Mitsuhide for years. Those who served Nobunaga lived under constant threat of explosive, humiliating punishment. Nobunaga was known to berate his generals in public, to mock their failures in front of their men. One account describes him seizing Mitsuhide by the head and slamming him against a pillar. Another records a cruel incident in which Mitsuhide's mother was used as a hostage during negotiations and was subsequently executed when Nobunaga's terms were broken. Whether these accounts are precisely true is debated by historians, but the pattern was clear. Nobunaga used humiliation as a management tool, and Mitsuhide was a proud man. In May 1582, the final trigger arrived. Nobunaga ordered Mitsuhide to give up his home domain of Tamba, the territory he had personally conquered and governed for years, and redeploy to assist the general Toyotomi Hideyoshi in the Western campaign against the Mori clan. It was not unusual for Nobunaga to reassign fiefs, but for Mitsuhide, losing Tamba meant losing everything he had built: his political base, his relationships, his identity as a lord. He would arrive in the West as a subordinate to Hideyoshi, a man of peasant birth, decades his social inferior. The order was a deliberate demotion. Mitsuhide began to plan. June 20th, 1582. Nobunaga arrived in Kyoto to prepare for his western march. He was traveling light, deliberately so. He had only a small personal guard, confident that Kyoto was peaceful and his enemies distant. He took up lodging at the Honnoji, a temple compound in the heart of the city, attended by fewer than 30 servants and attendants. Meanwhile, Mitsuhide had been given a plausible military reason to be near Kyoto, with his full army of 13,000 troops. He was supposedly en route west to support the campaign. On the evening of June 20th, he gathered his officers. His words, according to the chronicles, were brief and absolute. The enemy awaits at Honnoji. The officers had no idea what he meant. The enemy was days to the west, but discipline held. Mitsuhide's army turned toward Kyoto, marching quietly through the night, closing all roads leading into the city, sending mounted patrols ahead to prevent any messenger from escaping. By 2 o'clock in the morning on June 21st, all gates of the Honnoji were surrounded. None of Nobunaga's 30 attendants had heard a sound. 13,000 men had moved in silence through the streets of Japan's greatest city. When the sun rose, there would be no rescue and no retreat. The attack began before dawn. A servant at the temple gate heard the sound of iron on cobblestone and opened the gate a crack. he was cut down instantly. The shouting started. Inside the main hall, Nobunaga was woken by the noise and emerged to find his compound already breached. His first reaction, according to the account written by his page Mori Ranmaru, was not panic. He stepped onto the veranda, took in the sight of thousands of soldiers filling his courtyard, and turned calmly back inside. "This is rebellion," he reportedly said. Then he picked up a bow. What followed was a last stand told in fragments. Nobunaga fought personally, first with the bow until his arm was wounded, then with a spear. His 30 attendants formed a ring around him, dying one by one as the thousands outside poured through every entrance. Contemporary sources describe him fighting with extraordinary calm, giving orders even as the building burned around him, directing the evacuation of women and servants. When it was clear that all was lost, Nobunaga withdrew to an inner chamber. He pulled the screens shut. What happened next was witnessed by no one from the outside. When soldiers finally broke through, the chamber was in flames. Oda Nobunaga's body was never found.
Historians believe Nobunaga performed seppuku, ritual self-disembowelment, and that his attendants cremated the body to prevent it from being taken as a trophy. Others have suggested he died fighting. The mystery of the missing body haunted Japanese history for generations. Mitsuhide had moved swiftly to the adjacent Nijo Palace, where Nobunaga's son Nobutada was also lodging, and killed him too. By sunrise, both Nobunaga and his heir were dead, and Akechi Mitsuhide controlled Kyoto. In a single night, the man who was weeks from unifying Japan had been erased from the world. Mitsuhide was now the most powerful man in Japan. He moved quickly to consolidate control, visiting the imperial palace, distributing rewards to local lords, sending messengers to the great daimyo asking for recognition. But the great lords did not respond as expected. They were not hostile, they were calculating. The same aristocratic court that Mitsuhide had cultivated for years offered polite formalities and no commitments. Loyalty in the Sengoku era was not sentimental. It followed power, and everyone was waiting to see who would provide it. The answer came from the west with terrifying speed. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the peasant general, received word of Nobunaga's death within hours through a lightning courier network. He was deep in the Mori campaign, but he acted with stunning decisiveness. He forged a rapid peace treaty with the Mori clan, surrendering some gains but ending the war instantly, and then turned his entire army around. Over the next 11 days, Hideyoshi covered nearly 260 kilometers in the summer heat, a march that military historians still marvel at. On July 2nd, 1582, just 13 days after the Honnoji incident, he met Mitsuhide's army on the plains of Yamasaki. The Battle of Yamazaki lasted less than 2 hours. Mitsuhide's forces were outnumbered, exhausted from political maneuvering rather than rested for battle, and held the wrong ground. Hideyoshi's veterans
fresh from a ceasefire, struck with overwhelming force. Mitsuhide's army collapsed. He fled with a small bodyguard into the mountains north of Kyoto. 3 days later, he was killed, according to most accounts, by a farmer's spear-wielding mob during the chaos of flight, cut down in a bamboo grove. He had been the master of Japan for exactly 13 days. History remembers him as the 13-day shogun.
The Honnoji incident is one of the most debated events in Japanese history, not because what happened is unclear, but because the question of why remains genuinely open. Personal humiliation, rational calculation, a desperate bid for survival against a lord who had signaled he might eliminate him, or something more ambitious, a genuine belief that he could seize the moment and rule Japan himself. Japanese historians have proposed all of these, and none has settled the matter definitively. What is certain is that Mitsuhide had access to everything required: timing, proximity, and thousands of loyal troops. Whether the motivation was rage or strategy, the execution was precise.
The consequences of a single night echoed for centuries. Nobunaga's unfinished project of national unification was inherited by Hideyoshi, a man who would never have risen to supreme power had his master lived. Hideyoshi went on to unify Japan, then launch disastrous invasions of Korea, then die leaving an unstable succession, a chain of events that led directly to the rise of Tokugawa Ieyasu and 250 years of Tokugawa rule. Every political arrangement Japan inhabited until the modern era traces its origin in some way to the fire at Honnoji. One betrayal, one missing body. Everything changed. With Nobunaga dead, it fell to the man who had avenged him to complete the dream. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had been born a peasant with no family name, no formal rank, and no right to rule anything. He had worked his way into Nobunaga's household as a sandal-bearer. 20 years later, he stood over the ruins of his master's enemies, the undisputed ruler of a united Japan. In our next episode, the most extraordinary rise in Japanese history. The Honnoji incident happened in a single night, but it was built over 20 years of loyalty, ambition, humiliation, and fear. Akechi Mitsuhide made his choice in the dark, and Japan was never the same. If you found this story as gripping as we did, subscribe for a new episode every day. History's most extraordinary stories are just getting started.